Come, Holy Spirit, and kindle the fire that is in us. Take our lips and speak through them. Take our hearts and see through them. Take our souls and set them on fire. Amen. Our identity is a key part of our humanity. Who we think we are, who we believe ourselves to be, is an essential component of who we, in fact, are. Our identity is shaped by our family and history, by our passions and interests, by our vocations. Identities are formed by genetics, race, age, sexual orientation, health. Our identity as a human being evolves over the course of our lives and becomes formed by our life choices. In fact, our individual identities are a complex amalgamation of thousands of different factors. The Myers-Briggs Personality Inventory is a test given to all candidates for holy orders in the Episcopal Church. Now, I should tell you that we also have a psychiatric exam at the beginning of the process, and then we have another psychiatric exam at the end of the process to see if something happened in between. So we all take the Myers-Briggs Personality Inventory. It identifies 16 personality types and assigns 4 letters to each person tested. Many of you are already familiar with it from your own educational or work experiences. You're either an extrovert or an introvert, a sensor or an intuitive, a thinker or feeler, a judger or perceiver. And so when Episcopal clergy get together, we share these 4 letters as if they were astrological signs. I'm a Sagittarius, I'm a Gemini, I'm an ENFJ. But of course, the letters never tell the whole story, do they? Artists have often attempted to explore their multifaceted identities through self-portraits. Leonardo da Vinci, Rembrandt, Monet, Picasso, just to name a few. All are artists who revealed themselves through self-portraiture. Vincent van Gogh drew and painted himself more than 43 times between 1886 and 1889. What was he hoping to find? In today's gospel lesson, Jesus tries to reveal something of his core identity to his disciples. He wants them to understand who he truly is. But clearly, his explanation was something they didn't comprehend. The author of the Gospel of John writes, Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. It was hardly the first time. Jesus tried to explain that he was like a shepherd. Only the shepherd enters the sheepfold through the gate. Anyone else trying to enter the pen where the sheep were kept by slipping over the wall or sneaking under a fence must be a thief, must be a bandit. Jesus is not a thief. He's not a bandit. He's not a false prophet. He's not a Pharisee. Jesus is trying to be clear about who he is, and perhaps just as importantly, who he is not. The gatekeeper knows the shepherd. The sheep know the shepherd, his voice, his smell. And the shepherd knows the sheep and can call each of them by name. He leads them and they follow. Unlike cattle, sheep can't be driven. They must be led. Jesus wants the disciples to know that he's like a good shepherd who gently and lovingly leads his sheep to safety. And what all does a shepherd do? Well, a shepherd guards and protects and watches over the sheep. A shepherd feeds and makes sure the sheep are watered and cared for. If this is the image that Jesus chose to explain who he is, and therefore who God is for us, well, then we're blessed indeed, because a God who acts like a loving shepherd is very good news for all of us. I am the gate for the sheep. Now that's an interesting image because in the original metaphor, the shepherd receives the attention, not the gate. The gate provides two main functions. At night, the gate remains closed in order to protect the sheep from thieves and other predators. And during the day, the gate is open to give the sheep access to the pasture. A member of my Wednesday Bible study pointed out that sometimes shepherds in the ancient Near East would sleep across the entrance to the sheepfold and serve as a human gate. I think this is what Jesus might be referring to when he says, I am the gate for the sheep. As the gateway, Jesus is the very means by which God's salvation and abundant life come into the world. He's the channel, the conduit through which God's redemption arrives. Not the only gateway, at least from my theology, but for me, the most important one. It's an interesting question to ask. Who are you? You may be identified and labeled by others, but who do you say that you are? How would you describe yourself? What's your identity? And your identity as a Christian is an even deeper matter. When we baptize, we don't use the last name of the child or the adult. We use the first name and often their middle name, but the last name is generally unspoken. And why would that be? Well, because you may be a part of a prominent family. You may be a Roosevelt or a Bush or a Kennedy or a Vanderbilt. But in baptism, you become part of the whole Christian family. And your last name is essentially Christian. Dean Christian. It is your faith that becomes your primary identity. So who do you see when you look in the mirror? I'm always a little surprised to see this guy looking back at me who has a lot more white hair than blonde hair. I don't remember how that happened. I see a guy who's a little heavier than he was 40 years ago. I also see a person who knows a lot more than he once did, but who still has more questions than answers. After all these years of seeking after Christ, I am still loving the questions. Who do you see when you look into the mirror? What I'd like to see, what I hope to see, is a person whose primary identity is as a person of faith, a seeker, a sojourner, a pilgrim on the way. Jesus wanted the disciples to see and understand his essence, his soul, his deepest spiritual qualities, but apparently the disciples were just as confused as the Pharisees about who Jesus was and what he was on the planet to do. Our preacher last week, my friend Brooks Keith, said such nice things about me. If I would have known he was going to say all of those nice things, I would have invited him to preach here much sooner. But you'll remember how compellingly he spoke about the movie The Wizard of Oz, which begins in black and white and dramatically shifts to Technicolor. His point was that all of our lives move from black and white to brilliant, incomparable color in the light of the resurrection. In the stunning light of the resurrection, all the colors of the world become a vibrant, dazzling fluorescent. Still, I've noticed that for people of faith, even people of deep personal faith, all those colors can begin to fade. What was once shimmering and luminescent can easily become tired and worn if it isn't refreshed. That great preacher, George Buttrick, who preached not very far from here, came upon a farmer who had retrieved a lost sheep. And when Buttrick asked, "How is it that sheep wander away?" the farmer answered, "They just nibble themselves lost." They go, he explained, from one tuft of grass to another until at last they've just lost their way. And that can happen to us as well. We can nibble away at each inconsequential decision, each urgent but unimportant thing in our life, going from one to the next, to the next, to the next, until our life is gone and we have absolutely no idea where it went. We need to intentionally establish a structure of priorities so we don't nibble ourselves lost. We've been given this one precious life, just one. It's far too consequential to allow it to be frittered away. Our identity is a key part of our humanity. In the reading we heard earlier from the Acts of the Apostles, the early Christians would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, they spent much time together in the temple. They broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. This little sketch of the early church from the author of Luke Acts presents the church as a vibrant, functional community devoted to fellowship, which took the form of eating and praying and worshiping in the temple together. We want to be like that here. They were so completely committed to one another that they provided for those in need from their own resources. We want to be like that here. In short, these early Christians functioned like a strong, functional family. Don't we want to be like that here at St. Bart's? Those Christians were living every precious moment of their life, every precious moment of every single day in brilliant, living color. They were passionate in the bright light of the resurrection, and it should not be surprising to any of us that new members entered their ranks on a daily basis. Who wouldn't want to be a part of a group like that? Who wouldn't want to hang out with those people so full of joy, so full of compassion and empathy? I believe that Christ is the gateway to the lives we seek to live. I believe that Christ is the gateway to a life of service. I believe that Christ is the gateway to a life of meaning, a life of joy, a life of passion, a life of abundance. You want to know who we are? That's who we are. That's us. Sometimes we can't recognize ourselves. A life of purpose, a life of passion, a life of abundance, a life of joy.